Welcome to ESG Decoded. I'm Amanda Hsieh, and today I'm delighted to have Bob Pilko, the Strategic Relationships Director at Blade Energy Partners with me. Blade Energy Partners is an independent consulting company focusing on overcoming the challenges of complex projects in the energy industry. They provide leading-edge expertise to solve subsurface drilling, completion, production, and material challenges. Bob, welcome to ESG Decoded. How are you today?
Well, doing well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation and to be here. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I know you as a, may I say, geothermal energy advocate?
Yes. Geothermal energy is what a few years ago I used to say was the other energy. And when the alternative energy trend started a few years back, people certainly knew and know of wind and solar. But not that many people are familiar with geothermal energy, and it's actually very easy. It's something that's been there for many years, and it's the heat underneath our feet. So the deeper one goes into the ground, the hotter the ground gets. It's tapping that heat. That's geothermal energy.
I think it's easy to understand wind or solar because we can see it. It's above ground. We can see the turbines,
Yes.
or we can see it in the panels. And I think that's why geothermal sometimes is, how does that work? Because we see very little of it. It's mostly underground. And tell our listeners, give us an overview of what does geothermal energy production look like today? I know it's not what it was years ago. We're talking now about closed loop systems, but kind of give us an overview and kind of dispel some of those old, get the cobwebs out of what we think geothermal is or was and what it is actually today.
Yeah, well, what geothermal was, just to preface it, was tapping the subsurface heat. And in the original applications for housing, it was actually cooling as well. So you would circulate fluids underneath a structure, bring up the heat, or in the summer, you'd actually bring up the cool temperatures. And it was really just known as a heat pump. But today, modern day geothermal is going much deeper to very hot areas. And the oil and gas industry is perfect for that because since the oil and gas industry drills down extremely deep, we are quite familiar with the fact that deeper depths mean higher temperatures. And temperature relates to enthalpy, which relates to energy. And even though in an oil and gas well, high temperature meant some challenges, here with geothermal energy, it's a benefit because it's bringing up not just the potential products of oil and gas, but can also bring up that heat, which can be used directly at surface, like the original geothermal, or maybe brought to surface and then converted to electricity for use locally or maybe even production into the grid.
So there's an opportunity to co-produce the oil or gas that are coming out, but also that geothermal heat or energy. That's pretty cool that you get basically two out of one.
Yeah, what we have is a double product, and a double product that has tremendous use.
And, one of the things about wind and solar that was really important to me is those types of renewables is it broke the water energy nexus. And that's kind of the one that, especially now that we have kind of Texas West, we're in, drought basically. When we're thinking about what is the best use of water. But tell me now about the new closed loop geothermal energy systems. How water intensive are there? Is there that same concern that we have with like maybe nuclear or LNG or coal-fired plants? Or is it, decoupling that water energy nexus?
Closed loop geothermal is a system whereby you're not bringing the subsurface fluids to surface. And in a historical geothermal system, you'd be bringing up everything the formation can produce. In a closed loop system, you actually keep everything down whole. It would not be appropriate for co-production, but it would be appropriate for just heat production. And what you do is you circulate downhole, typically in the same wellbore, although it could be adjoining wellbores that are connected subsurface. And as the fluid is heated up, when it gets to the bottom hole, it comes up to reservoir temperature, and then that's circulated up and goes through a heat exchanger, and that becomes the driver for typically an electrical turbine. So the closed loop system has some real advantages in the fact that you keep everything sealed up. There's no emissions to surface. And in the modern day closed loop systems, the downhole efficiency of capturing that heat is starting to rival the surface efficiency of heat transfer in a heat exchanger. So the new closed loop systems are not only quite exciting, but they continue to be developed even better for higher efficiency. So closed loop is certainly a way of the future.
And what I'm thinking in my mind is this a way for oil and gas companies to convert older wells and get a more use out of, let's say, the same well?
It certainly can be. The great thing about the oil and gas industry is, again, we understand the subsurface. We know how to reach it. We have reached it. We know the bottom hole temperature, so we know how much energy is there and therefore can be extracted. The question about using older wells, which is repurposing oil and gas wells, for geothermal use really comes down to three questions. First of all, what is the prize? How deep does the well go? So what's the bottom hole temperature? Secondly, what is the configuration of the well? Because we want a wellbore that's as big as possible, so we can put in a big closed loop system that'll collect as much energy as it can. And then thirdly, quite frankly, what is the existing capability of the well to stay in a state where it keeps its integrity? Because unfortunately, sometimes old wells lose their integrity, and they would not be a good purpose for anything other than plugging and maybe abandoning.
And what is the average life of these new geothermal systems? And I ask that because we all know with wind, you need to change out the blades occasionally. And with solar, of course, it's a lifespan. What are we talking about for an average lifetime for a geothermal system?
Well, the great thing about that is wells of almost every type have a long lifespan if they are designed correctly and they are installed correctly. Oil and gas wells certainly have lifespans well above 20 years, if not 30 years, in some cases, 40 plus. Geothermal wells have the same type of lifespan, assuming, again, they're designed correctly and they are installed correctly. So the great thing about it is once that sunk cost is there to drill and complete the wells, you have a tremendous longevity with very low operating expense over the term of the well. So it's a great benefit.
When I think of geothermal energy, where it's being produced around the world, the two areas that pop out to me would be Iceland and California. But I believe there's more areas that are ripe, beautiful. What about in our region? What are some prime spots?
Well, I'll mention the big existing geothermal spots, and you hit those two, Iceland and California for sure. There's also Indonesia and the Philippines, which have geothermal for many, many years and very successfully. Anything in the Pacific Ring of Fire, you've got very high temperatures at low depths, so it's easily accessible. Here along the Gulf Coast, and when I say that, I mean from very South Texas, curving around along the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf Coast, and even offshore, you have some very high temperatures at achievable depths. And that for geothermal energy has not really been tapped yet. However, projects are starting. And since we know the prize is there, the resource is there, then the only question is, with individual fields and economics, is it applicable for the specific site and where the rights are to drill? So we're working on that now, not only me and my company, but others as well.
I could see how E&Ps who perhaps have a net zero goal or a greenhouse reduction goal in general, let's say, might be interested in investigating this, kind of assessing this technology to see if it helps them to reduce their overall greenhouse gas emissions. What's the interest then? What are the trends you're seeing?
Great question, because this year, it actually started last year with ESG really coming into the view of independent E&Ps and super majors as well. Geothermal can stand on its own. However, you also have the ESG benefit of a non-polluting and a non-emission resource that provides benefits on its own, but also the additional benefit to reduce tier 1, tier 2, and even tier 3 emissions. It's really brings much into the equation. And it was about February last year, soon after the World Economic Forum, that we started to get calls from independents and others, specifically because of that ESG benefit.
You often speak around town, and I know we've been very busy recently speaking at OTC, also at Pivot 2021. Any big highlights you could share with us? Anything exciting, anything big highlights that you took away from those conferences?
I'll first mention Pivot 2021. It was the second year for the Pivot series. And for those who don't know, the Pivot series is organized by the University of Texas Geothermal Entrepreneurial Organization, which is partially funded by the Department of Energy. Last year, there were 7,500 people from all over the world who called in a full schedule of 8 to 5, Monday to Friday presentations. This year, built on top of that. And I don't know the count this year. Don't get me wrong, but I think it was about double the number of participants. So it shows not only the interest, but the benefits of geothermal is really being understood throughout the oil and gas industry, but also throughout the power industry and throughout others as well. So the understanding of what geothermal is, what it can do, and what it can do for others is really spreading on a broad basis.
Bob, we talked about the technical. There's obviously an economic element to assessing geothermal energy. What else do we need to really bring more geothermal projects on board to realize them?
Well, yes, the technical is, how to capture the prize and bring it to surface and use it. The economics, and this is one reason why existing oil and gas wells and fields help, because much of the infrastructure is there. The other thing is the regulatory. And that is not something some people think of, but when you have an existing oil and gas field or an existing industrial area, you have the permits, you have the rights of way, you have ingress, egress, you have so many things that are already in place. Yes, it's infrastructure, but more than that, you have the regulatory permits. And so often all that is on private land, even though the permits you would have gotten from the regulatory authorities. So it makes it so much easier and so much faster to tap the subsurface resource. Unfortunately, some potential great fields are on federal lands, and the federal permitting process is just a nightmare. So that's another great thing about the Gulf of Mexico region, is the fact that between the oil and gas industry, which spreads through the region, and the users of the energy, which is industry and household as well, the permits are all in place. And it makes it so much easier to develop geothermal, both onshore and potentially offshore as well.
Because the oil and gas companies already have all this in place, do you see more potential partnerships, that's kind of a loose word, between oil and gas companies and power generation companies? Or do you think it's going to be kind of what we traditionally think as something, very, siloed, going at it alone? Or do you think we'll be seeing more kind of JVs and partnerships to make this happen?
Another good question. It'll be a mixture. And if we look at existing oil and gas fields, of course, the oil and gas companies, the operators, and the mineral interest owners, the property owners have the rights. So that makes it so much easier to add in geothermal energy as an additional product. However, if there is conversion to electricity, which most often there will be, then the power companies come in. And with the power companies, the real key is to get a PPA, a power purchase agreement. That may be with the power company itself, or the power company may assist in getting long-term power purchase agreements with industrial users. So the mixture of how a project will come together will really vary. It'll vary per location. It'll vary per distance to the market. It'll vary as concentrated as the market is and the concentration of potential users. So for instance, just yesterday, we closed on a project with a big international oil company, and they gave us one offshore field to take a look at and one onshore field. And certainly we will look at the technical, we'll look at the economics, but tied in with the economics will be where are the geothermal fields in relation to the market and what regulatory hurdles, if any, will have to be jumped over to make sure we can get that geothermal energy to the users along with the oil and gas. These will be co-produced fields.
There's a famous entrepreneur, Elon Musk, who is building his giant spaceport down in South Texas. They're going to need a lot of energy. Do we know if they're looking into anything related to geothermal down there?
Well, let's put it this way. South Texas is a very geothermal appropriate area. And Elon Musk, it's been in some of the oil and gas announcements. Not only acquired a small independent oil company, but also a land demand company to establish rights. And what we would like to do is add geothermal energy to that. One reason why they were looking at an oil company is actually for natural gas to feed into his spaceport. And when you split natural gas, you get hydrogen, which of course fuels rockets. But we would love to also provide geothermal energy, which can provide electricity to the spaceport, maybe direct heat for some of the facilities there. We'll see how that works out.
Bob, if Elon Musk or anyone else wants to contact you, what website, social media, how should they get a hold of you?
Really, the best way is direct. I'm with Blade Energy Partners at blade-energy.com is our website. In the contact list, I'm listed there in the Houston office. That's really the best way. And through other groups, maybe IADC or SPE or AADE, I should be available as well. But the best way is always direct.
Wonderful. Bob, thank you so much for joining me today and helping me and our listeners understand more about geothermal and also just the opportunities there are with kind of existing assets in the oil and gas industry. And hopefully Elon gives you all a call soon.
Oh, hopefully so. And maybe get a free flight into space.